So in the last class, we were talking about the servlet life cycle and the servlets, how they can share the data node life cycle. And we saw an application of servlet which will fetch all the product records, and it will display them in the table format, right? Yeah. So today, as I told you people, so we'll be talking about HTTP protocol. Yes, HTTP protocol. So HTTP protocol, earlier once I mentioned what role it plays. Yes. So what is the role played by HTTP here? Yes. Why do we use HTTP protocol? Why do we use HTTP protocol? So basically, a client and server, they use this protocol to interact with each other. Okay, the client and server, they both use this protocol to interact with each other. Yes. So whenever the client wants to place the request, whenever the client wants to place a request, you'll find that client constructs a HTTP request. HTTP request will be constructed. Whenever the server, if it wants to send the response back to the client, it will construct a HTTP response and it will send it back to the client. It will construct a HTTP response and it will send it back to the client. Yes. Yes. Okay. So the client and server, they interact with each other through this protocol. So client, to place a request, it constructs a HTTP request, and the server, if it wants to send the response back to the client, it constructs a HTTP response and will send it back to the client. Yes. Yep. Now it is important to understand what exactly you'll have in that HTTP request. What exactly you'll have in the HTTP request. Okay, here the HTTP request, you'll find that it is divided into three parts. HTTP request is divided into three parts. What are they? Number one, request line, headers, and message body. HTTP request is divided into three parts this way. Yes. Yep. So first we'll see this request line. So we'll just explore the complete HTTP request. So in the request line, what information you'll have? Yes. Generally, who will construct this HTTP request? Yes. Who will construct HTTP request? Who constructs HTTP request? The web client, I can say. Okay. So constructing HTTP request is the responsibility of the web client. So web client, or I can say browser. We call it as a browser as well, right? Yes. So whenever the client, if it wants to place the request on the server, so first of all, it constructs HTTP request. It will construct HTTP request. Okay. In the request, in the HTTP request, we got three parts. So the first part is request line, where you will have the syntax of request line. This is how it looks like. So you'll have the HTTP method details like get and the URI, and then the protocol and its version details. That is what you'll have in HTTP request. Request line, I'm sorry. Request line. Sorry. Get is a method name, so I can say HTTP method. The syntax should be this. HTTP method, URI, protocol, and its version. So example for this request line is get, let's say, home.html http slash 1.1. So get is a HTTP method. This is one of the HTTP methods. Why the client uses this HTTP method? Basically, the client uses HTTP method to specify what type of request the client is placing on the server. The client is basically placing what type of server. To specify that details, it uses this method. You have altogether 7 HTTP methods. So one is get, post, put, delete, head, please make a note of it, trace, and options. These are 7 HTTP methods. Yes. Yes. Okay. Now in our request line, so that example request line, you'll find that we are using HTTP method get. Here the HTTP method get, the client uses this method to request the server to provide a resource. Okay, I can say in other words, to fetch the resource from the server. So whenever the client wants to access a resource, okay, from the server, it uses get method. So through get method, the client is requesting the server to provide a resource. The client is requesting the server to provide a resource. Yes. So through HTTP methods, the client will specify what type of request the client is placing, basically. Hope you people got it. Yes. Okay. So similarly, we have other methods. I'll talk about it later. Okay. Hope you have made a note of it. Did you people do that? Okay. So get method is used to request the server to provide a resource. Fine. And what is the resource? Which resource the client wants to access? Where are the details? So that resource details, you see, will follow that method name. You see home.html. Home.html. Just a minute. Yeah, sorry. So that resource name, you see, in our example, in this case is ht home.html page. That's it. So the URI of that resource. URI means user URL, right? So what is URI? URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier. Can someone tell me the difference between URL and URI? you'll find that in the URL you'll have the complete details about the resource. It includes the location, complete details. So every detail about the resource, you'll find it in the URL. Given a URL, you can fetch that resource. Now you see, you will find that here, in case of URI, you only got that resource name at most, in which folder directory have that resource, but not that location and all. Okay, yes, that is a difference. So it only includes that resource name and all. That's it. Okay. Now the client is just, or why the client is only providing this URI then? Because client has already connected to that server. So it uses URL first to connect to the server. Now it is asking for that particular resource from the server. That's it. Okay. Yes. Next, you see you got the protocol details. So the client also provides the details about the protocol, so which it is using. So in this case, the client uses HTTP protocol, to place this request. And the version of the protocol is also important. So 1.1. It is HTTP request 1.1. Yes. Okay. So that is about request line. So this way in the request line, we got the details about the resource, the method used by the client, and you see we got the protocol and its version details. Yeah. Next, we got headers. Headers, I can say that they provide some additional details about the request. Headers, they provide additional information about the request. So generally headers are name value pairs. Headers syntax, this is how it looks like. You'll have a name, colon, a value associated to it. You'll have a header name, I can say actually. Header name and header value. Yes. Yes. Okay. So through headers, as I told you people, the client will be providing additional information about the request. So what is that additional information about the request? Let's see. So I got an example here, an image. Generally we can't see HTTP request, it's just an image, I can say. Yes. You see, this is an example how your HTTP request may look like. So the first line here, you see, it's a request line. First line is a request line. You got that HTTP method, the URL of the resource, and all such details. Next, we got headers, like we got a date header is there. We got a date header. So date, basically it is used to, or it provides the details about the request when it was constructed, when exactly the request was constructed, when exactly the request was constructed, that date you'll get. Okay, yes. Next, host. So basically the host header, uh, it it indicates like the request is placed on which server, the host name of that server. For every server you'll have a host name, right? So it provides the host name of the server here. Yes. So in this case it is www.myfavoriteamazingsite.com. Okay, something like that. So request will be sent to this server whose host name is this. Yeah. Next, we got from. Sometimes when the user is placing the, when the client is placing the request, it should also provide the end user details, some sort of details about the end users, like the email address of the user, that is a username or something like that. Okay, yes. So that details are also included here. Next, you got accept. So the accept header. So it is used by the client to specify to the server what type of content it supports. Basically, the client supports what type of content. That details you see they are provided through this HTTP, accept header. See, in this case it says it can understand plain text or text plain and text HTML. So these are the two different types of content the client can understand. Usually, so that won't be the case. If client supports a lot of content types, many different types of content. Okay, it's just an example. Now you got user agent here. So user agent header is used by the client to specify to provide the details about itself. The client introduces itself to the server. That means the version of the client, you know. So here, for example, you got this Mozilla 4.4. That means client is Mozilla compatible, and it is Microsoft Internet Explorer MSIE 6.0. MSIE 6.0. It is running on Windows platform, it seems, where it is running on Windows NT platform, it seems. So this way, the server it will provide the details about itself, including the platform where it is running. So all such details will be provided by the client to the server. This way, we'll have headers. Next, we got message body. In the message body, the client can send. It can include. It can add that. the user data, if there is any input data related to the users. Okay, if there is any input data related to the users, that data can be added to the message body. Okay, yes, that input data can be added to the message body here. Now you will find that message body is optional. Not every time the client uses this message body, the client may or may not use message body. So most of the times it depends on the, or definitely actually I can say it depends on the HTTP method used by the client. It depends on the HTTP method used by the client. Okay, yes. So for example, if the client uses get method, generally it won't use message body. The client, if it uses get method, it won't use message body. Okay, that's it. Okay, so hope you understood this HTTP request format, right? So this way the client constructs a HTTP request and it will send it to the server. Just a minute, please, just a minute. Yeah, I'm sorry. So next we'll go through HTTP response first, then later on I'll talk about HTTP methods as well. HTTP response. So who constructs this HTTP response? Yes, Who constructs this HTTP response? The server. That's right. So you see, the server will take the client's request. It will process the client's request. Once the server, it is done processing the client's request, you see, it may generate some response. And this response, it has to be sent to the server, to the client. Server, it might have generated some response which needs to be sent to the client. Now the server, how it can send that response back to the client. So the server uses this HTTP response. Server uses HTTP response format. So it constructs that HTTP response. It constructs a HTTP response, and it will send it. It will add the response data to this HTTP response. It will add the response data to the HTTP response, and will send it back to the client. Yes. So HTTP response also looks similar to HTTP request. So you'll have status line, you'll have headers, you'll have message body. Okay. Yes. So when we talk about the status line, in the status line, in the syntax of status line, this is how it looks like. You'll have HTTP and version details, sorry, protocol and version details, I can say. Protocol and version. Next, the status code, and then you'll have status message. Example, HTTP 1.1, status code 200, status message, let's say, is okay. Okay, fine. So now the server, you see, as part of the request line, definitely it will add the details about the version and the protocol the server is using basically. Okay, and then server adds a status message. So this is very important. What is the status message? So status code. So what is the status code? So status code, it indicates what exactly happened to the request placed by the client. Status code indicates what exactly happened, or will provide the details about the request the client has placed. Status code provides the details about the request the client has placed. Means whether the request was successfully processed or whether there was an issue. If there is an issue, what is that issue? So the status code, it indicates those details. Okay, status code, it indicates those details. Yes. Okay. Yes. So here 200, in this example 200, it indicates that the request was successfully processed. That status code 200, it indicates that the request which was placed by the server was successfully processed. Yes. Request placed by the server, sorry, client, was successfully processed. What about the status message here? Status message also means the same here. Status message also means the same. Yes. I'm sorry. So here OK means it indicates that everything is fine. So request was processed completely. So message is just a text representation of that status code. Message is just the text representation of status code here. That's it. Now, while browsing through the net, you might have come across a status code, most commonly found status code. What is it? While browsing through the web, what is the most common status code which you found, which you came across? You'll see a number. Yes, 404. Sometimes you will find 500 also, right? Yes. So 404 is the most common status code. Yes. Okay. So 404 generally it indicates that the requested resource was not available. It indicates that the requested resource was not available. Okay. Next we got headers again. So headers here are again same. You'll have a header name and a header value. Yes. Okay, so now this headers, the response headers which you got here, again I can say that they also used to provide some additional information about the response. They used to specify the additional information about the response here. Server also provides a lot of details to the client as part of the response, I can say. So let me show you people HTTP response. Okay, now on your screens you see this image which you're looking at here. So this is for HTTP response, you can say. Okay, so you see, even the server will provide the date header, which indicates when exactly this response was constructed. Yes. Next, it provides the server. The server is also introducing itself to the client. The server says it is which server, okay, the version of it, and all such details are there. Right. So next, accept range. So what type of content it accepts, bytes, and this content type here, you know what it is. So it is used to specify what type of response the server is sending back to the client. So the response type, what type of response the server is sending back to the client. So here in this case it is text HTML, so which indicates that the response is either text or HTML content. That's it. Okay, fine. So actually this content type for that we have a standard. We say it is MIME types. They are basically called as MIME types. MIME types. So here, you see, these are all different types of MIME types. In the middle, you have that MIME type, and the description of the type is provided here. Okay, yes. So MIME, it stands for Multimedia Internet Mail Extensions. MIME stands for Multimedia Internet Mail Extensions. MIME. That is what MIME means. Multimedia Internet Mail Extensions. Yes. Okay, please make a note of it. So this is a standard. Mine is a standard universally accepted here in the web world, and they used to describe the content types. They used to describe. Mine is used to describe the content type here. So you see, for plain text, for text or HTML, we use text plain. Sorry, HTML plain text. Okay. So similarly, for other content types also, you got appropriate name specified here. See, for bitmap, image, PMP. Okay. So if it is, you see, there are a lot of types. CSV files, text CVS, CSV, I'm sorry, comma separated values. So to the client, it provides the content type details. Basically, why the client needs this details, the content type here, why the client needs this details? What do you people think? So basically, client has to render that response. So server is sending the response back to the client, right? So client is responsible for rendering that response. So client should know what type of response it is, so that it can use an appropriate application to render the response. Client on its own, it won't be able to display all the types of contents. On its own, it won't be possible for the client to render any type of content. Okay, yes. So for example, if it is text or HTML content, client can render that rendering means display. The client can render the text or HTML content, so it won't be a problem. For suppose if that content type is some other type, so if it is a video file or an audio file, so client cannot render that content on its own. So for that, client will use an appropriate application like you see a media player, something like that, to render that response. It has to use an appropriate application. For example, if the content type is PDF content, then the client uses PDF reader. The client uses PDF reader to render that response. This way, based on the content type, the client will use an appropriate application to render the response. Okay, yes, fine. So that is very helpful information for the clients. Next, content length. You see, in our case, the content length is 170. Content length is 170. That means here basically it is text content. So it is possible to count the number of characters. It is nothing but the number of characters in that text content. And then we got another header, last modified. So when this resource was last modified, so that in our case, what is that resource? It's an HTML page. So you'll find that it's basically an HTML page. So how I'm saying that it is an HTML page, you see down in the message body, you got that actual content. In the message body, you have that content. So it is related to that HTML page itself, right? So this way, the server constructs a response. It includes all the information about the response here to this HTTP request, HTTP response. It adds all that information and then it will send it to the client. The client uses this HTTP response. Okay, it reads that response and it renders that response accordingly back to the end users. So basically a web client or browser, it acts as a mediator between the end users and the web application, right? Yes. So on behalf of end users, the client places HTTP request uh, and, and will send it to the server. So it gets a response from the server. So it should take that response and in turn it is supposed to um, render that response to the end user. So this is how the client and server, you see, they follow a standard procedure. So always there are standard formats defined in the HTTP protocol for both HTTP request and response. You got standard formats for both request and response, so which are used by the client and server to communicate with each other, to interact with each other. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, is it clear for you people? Any questions in this regard? Please let me know. Okay. Now, let me show you people how to construct a servlet. Okay. Sorry. How to create a servlet using this predefined servlet class called as HTTP servlet. Yes. Okay. You know why we need this HTTP servlet? Let's see. So far, how did we create a servlet? How did we create a servlet so far? How did we create the servlet so far? So we have used generic servlet class. Am I right? How did we create a servlet using generic servlet class? But you'll find that in Java, that's in the servlet API, you got this predefined class called as HTTP servlet. So we can also use this servlet class to create a servlet. And basically, HTTP servlet is in which package? Java x.servlet.http package. You know, Java people have identified the importance of HTTP protocol. Why only you have a servlet as particularly for HTTP protocol? Because more than 90% of the web works with HTTP protocol. Yes, more than 90% of the web, it works with HTTP protocol. Yes. So that's the reason why Java people, what they did is here they created a separate package, and as part of that package they have provided a servlet which we can use to particularly deal with HTTP request. This servlet which you got here, HTTP servlet, so this is specially used to handle the client's request or HTTP client's requests, I can say. HTTP client's request means the clients have used HTTP protocol to place a request. Only that HTTP request can be handled by this HTTP server. Okay. Yes. Only HTTP request can be handled by this server. Yes. Okay. So now, what about the generic servlet then? Generic servlet, will it be able to handle HTTP request? What do you people think? You know, generic servlet also can handle HTTP request, but it is not that specialized. Okay, it can take it, but you have HTTP servlet, which is more specific here, which is more appropriate to handle the HTTP request, I can say. So generic servlet, you'll find that it can not only take HTTP requests, but it can also take generic servlet can take the requests which are placed using other protocols. Now, you know what are the other protocols which the client can use to place the request? What do you people think? What are the other protocols which can be used by the client to place the request? Any idea about the other protocols? So we got HTTP, you got FTP, we got POP, we got SMTP, and so on. FTP is the most predominant protocol which is used in the web. FTP is a file transfer protocol. FTP is basically a file transfer protocol, which is particularly used to deal with file transfers and all. Yes. So POP is post office protocol, which is used for mails. Yes, emails. That's right. And POP stands for post office protocol. Okay, if you want, you can make a note of it. Post office protocol, and it is generally used for mails. SMTP is also, it stands for simple mail transfer protocol. SMTP stands for simple mail transfer protocol, and it is also it is also sorry. So can you people hear me? Thank you. Yes. So you'll find that, okay, hello. Now is it better? Now, now you see, you'll find that you have several such protocols in the market, sorry, in the web, used for different purposes. So POP and SMTP, especially, they used for mails. So HTTP is a generic protocol, I can say. So which is which supports many different types of contents. Okay, which is very flexible to use protocol. Okay, yes. So generic servlet which we have created so far, that servlet can take any client's requests. Generic servlet basically it can take the client's request or place you used any protocol. Okay, any protocol requests, okay, can be handled by generic servlet. Any protocol request can be handled by generic servlet. But when it comes to HTTP, so it is only for HTTP protocol, very much specific to HTTP protocol. It is specialized to deal with HTTP requests, I can say. It is very much specialized to deal with HTTP requests. Yes. So now here we'll see how to create this HTTP servlet. Yep. So here you see now you can create a servlet. You can create a class and make it extends this HTTP servlet class. You see the way we have created a servlet by extending generic servlet class by making a class extends generic servlet class. Similarly, you can also create a HTTP servlet by making a Java class extends HTTP servlet class. Yes, and you see if you're using generic servlet to create a class, sorry, to create a servlet, the request processing code, where you will write it in the servlet, the request processing code, particularly where you'll write it in the servlet. Yes, come on here. So we have created servlets, right? So in the servlet, in which method did we write the request processing code? In the servlet, in the servlet class, we have defined a method, and in which method did we write that request processing code? In the service method. Okay. Yes. So always that request processing code, we used to write it in the service method. That is how it works. But here we'll use do xxx methods. I can say do methods will be there. So what are these do methods? When it comes to HTTP, the client may place a request using different types of HTTP methods. The client may place a request using that HTTP methods. Okay, and as I told you people, each method here, it is used to specify what type of request the client is placing. Each method is used to specify what type of request the client is placing on the server. Okay, HTTP method is used to specify what type of request the client is placing on the server. Now, to handle a particular HTTP method request, to handle a particular HTTP method request, we have methods here. For example, we got do get method, so which we can use to handle HTTP method get request. We got do post, which is used to handle post request. Similarly, for all other HTTP methods, we got an appropriate method in this HTTP select class. For do head method is there. Do delete method is there. Do trace method is there. Do options method is there. That's it. Okay. Okay. So for every HTTP method, you got an appropriate do method here. Okay. Yes. So now let's create a servlet by extending HTTP servlet class. Okay. Yes. Again, I'm going to use the servlet wizard itself to create the servlet. So if you select the source folder, right click on it, you got a new servlet wizard option. Okay, select the servlet wizard. New servlet wizard option. So now the package details com.controller and the class name is, let's say, test servlet or sample servlet. And the super class down, you see, so let it be HTTP servlet itself. This time we'll leave it as this. Okay. Next, I'll click on next here. So we need to configure the URL for this servlet. Again, you're going to do the same here as well. Even for the HTTP servlet, you'll have a URL, okay, which is nothing but a string. Yes. So down you have this URL. So I'll call it as samples of. That's it. Click on next. Once you click on next, so you'll find that method which I'm talking about. Okay. Now you see you got check boxes for each method. So which methods you want to add to this servlet? As of now, I want to add only do get method here. I'll uncheck this do post also, just to make sure that only do get is checked here. Make sure that you only check that do get. Got it? Yes. Now you can click on finish. So now we got this sample servlet, and it extends HTTP servlet class this time. The sample servlet extends HTTP servlet class. And you see in the sample servlet class we got the do get method. You can think of it as a service method now, and in this method itself, so you're supposed to write the request processing task. So reading the client's request, processing the client's request, so such code. So you have to write it here in this method. Okay, you see we saw service method, right? And we saw the parameters for the service method, right? We saw the parameters for the service method. Okay, now is there any difference between the service method and this do get method? They look similar, right? So can you people tell me, do you see any difference here? Do you see any difference between this do get method and the service method? You see, yes. The parameter types, when it comes to service method, they are servlet request and servlet response, just a servlet request and response. But when it comes to this HTTP servlet, you'll find that it is HTTP servlet request, this do get method. You see the parameter types are HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response. Yes. Okay. So that servlet request, sorry, this HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response, I can say that they are subtypes of There are subtypes of HTTP request and HTTP response. Okay, HTTP request and response are subtypes of servlet request and response. They are subtypes of servlet request and servlet response. And here, the HTTP request, I can say that it represents HTTP request. HTTP servlet request, I'm sorry. HTTP servlet request, you'll find that it represents HTTP request format, which we have discussed so far. So the client places HTTP request, right? So that HTTP request, you'll find that it is represented using that HTTP servlet request object. So HTTP servlet request object represents HTTP request. And HTTP servlet response object here, it represents HTTP response, which is constructed by, sorry, yeah, which is constructed by the server here, I can say. It is constructed by the server. Okay, so far we have discussed about HTTP request, right? So all that request information, that HTTP request information, so it will be wrapped in this HTTP servlet request object. You got the point? The HTTP request which is constructed by the client and it is sent to the server, right? So server will take this HTTP request and it will add that HTTP request details to the it will add that HTTP details to the HTTP request details to the HTTP servlet request object. It will add the request details HTTP request details to the HTTP servlet request object. Yes, that is how it works. Next, here you can't use that method. Okay. Yes. You can't do that. So we have to just use this methods as is because the server will be calling this methods. Server is designed such a way that it follows that standard specification and invokes only those methods which are prescribed or which are defined in the API. Okay. Yes. Now this method which you got here, do get method. Basically, I can say that it can take the HTTP method get requests from the client. It can take HTTP method get request from the client. So now from here everything will be same. So whatever you did in the servlets so far, we can also do the same here as well. But additionally, you'll find that we can read that request information and all here, HTTP request details. For example, you know that the client will send that headers as part of the request. The client sends that headers as part of the request, right? So that headers, we can read them here. How can you read that headers? How can you read that headers? So for that, we got a method in the HTTP servlet request. You got a method in the HTTP servlet request itself. So request dot call this method header names. Get header names. So what exactly this get header names method does? This get header names method will return all the headers, header names here. So client will be sending headers part of the request, right? Client will send the headers as part of the request. So all that headers names, all that header names will be written here. How they will be written? So they will be added to, okay, you'll get an enumeration object which you can use to read the header names. You'll just get an enumeration object. Internally, you know, that header names are stored into collection object. Header names are stored into a collection object. So when you call this get header names, it returns that enumeration object which we can use to read the elements from the collection. So where did we come across enumeration? What is enumeration? Did anyone remember? Yes, enumeration, you came across this interface called as enumeration in collections. Enumeration, it is used to read the elements from the vector class, especially the elements which are stored in the collection object of type vector. So from that vector object you can read the elements using enumeration. It's an old interface, you can say, which is similar to your iterator. It is very much similar to your iterator. Yes. Now let's try to read this header names using that enumeration object. So we'll read that header names. Now I'll do one thing. For every header, you got a value associated. Am I right? For every header, you got a value associated. Yes. So we'll do one thing. We'll print the header name. Not only the header name, but also the value which is associated to that header. So we'll print that value as well. That would be more appropriate, right? Yes. header name, and to read the value associated to that header, we'll use this get header method. In the request object itself, we got this method get header. So what it does, so it will take that header name and returns the value associated to that particular header. Yes. So now this way we'll read all the header names which are provided by the client. So that header names list is available with the server. It will store that header names in some sort of collection object. Later on, you see, we can obtain that enumeration object reference here. Through that enumeration object, you can read that header names list. Once you got the header name, we can also read the associated value to that header. The associated value, that header, you can also read it. Yes. Okay. Yes. So now we'll close this body in HTML tags. That's it. Okay. So let's try to deploy this application on the server. So as part of that application, now we got a new servlet, sample servlet, so which we have created using HTTP servlet class. Okay, now the application is deployed or it is hosted on the server. So the question is, how can we call that servlet, sample servlet? How can we access that servlet, call that servlet? In the last class, we saw that without using a form, how to call the servlet? Yes, without using the form, how can we call the servlet? We can use the URL of the servlet. So for every servlet, you'll have a URL. So we can use that URL. Okay. So what is the URL of the servlet? Sample serve. I can type in that URL of the servlet here. That's it. That's it. Now you see, you got the response from the server. Okay, just a minute, please. So I didn't add a break tag after printing each header name and value. Okay. After reading the header name and value, we'll just move the cursor to the next line. Yes. So now you see these are all headers. Accept language, accept is one header, accept language is another header, accept encoding, user agent, host, and connection methods. See, accept header provides the details about what type of content the client can it can accept. What type of content the client can accept. So that details are here. See, the list is very big. So almost any type of content is supported by this client. That is what it indicates. Okay. So next we got accept language. That means for every machine you have a language which is set. So I guess for you people it is US English. So if you're from US, from India it is Indian English. Or I guess for Australia it is Australian English. That's it. So this way you'll have that language. And user agent, can you people tell me what details you're looking at here? User agent. What does that means? The client details. So client is providing the details about itself. So the client's version, what browser it is, the client is hosted on which machine, so all such details. It says it is Microsoft Internet Explorer 8 and it is running on Windows NT platform and all other details you have it here. Okay, fine. So you see, we can't read this details using generic servlet. Okay, in that servlet request object, which we use for the generic servlet generally, service method parameter, generic sorry, that servlet request object which we got for the generic servlet service method, we can't read the data. Yes. Okay. Yes. So any questions in this regard, please let me know. No, I have a question. Okay, first let me see if you people got any questions. So I got a question. So my question is this servlet now, it can handle which HTTP method details. This servlet which you have created here, it's HTTP servlet, right? So it can handle which HTTP method details. It can only take HTTP method. get details. Okay, it can only take HTTP method get details. That's it. Yeah. So hope you people got it. As of now, it can only take get method request because we are only overriding do get method. Do get method can only take get request. So what about the other HTTP methods? So I'll talk about it in the next class. Okay. So we'll see the other HTTP methods. Okay, and we'll close this HTTP protocol concept, and I'm going to introduce you people to JSPs tomorrow. JSPs. We'll see Java server pages, and also I'll provide you the weekend schedule. So this time weekend we'll have 8 hour session, not one day, couple of days, Saturday and Sunday, 4 hours. I'll give you the schedule. Okay. So that's all for today.